Moving forward. This book is based on my steps with God and past relations of the heart. My experiences impacted me to walk diligently and stand steadfast through spiritual warfare. The religious talk about the surface sexual concerns with mankind rather than going deeper. While everyone has experienced a relationship that was formed through selfless pride, not everyone acknowledges spirituality once they have been robbed of their innocence through cold-hearted desires. I hope this book helps those struggling to draw lines with their sexual affairs to overcome sexual addiction. My prior book, The Unlimited Resurrection, formed the basis of this book. To avoid murmuring about the feelings and emotions of the player mentality, I wanted to bring it to a general perspective. This will allow the players to acknowledge things they cannot explain gracefully, to face fears. A lot of men suffer from a sexual disorder and don't acknowledge it as being a trial test, which often leaves their sense of authority surrounded by fear. God wanted mankind to look out for the things of this world. He didn't intend their emotions to be trodden down by the feet of other men. Because mankind's pure intent often becomes distorted by womankind's beliefs and thus tactics. This book was written to understand the player's imperfections and to help those who don't realize that change is possible from God's perspective. Also, to give the women closure who are seeking a perfect man. There is no perfect man, but change can help a player overcome as you change and reshape your life. Sure, change is a step-by-step process, but you don't have to wait. You can seek help today. My central message has an affect reason for topics of interest. This message affects women and men in multiple areas of life and reveals how it is possible to perceive things differently. Once you have found an affect reason for writing a book, research current topics, and review how people from the past dealt with the same issues. Then acknowledge God's plan and purpose for your life, and start with a testimony to guide you through writing. My poetry is at the back of this book, which are the experiences that I have encountered with players. Enjoy your copy of this book. Chapter 1. Introduction. Ordinary people classify actors, pro athletes, hip-hop artists, rappers, retail owners, singers, stylists, as the men who embodies the most swag. Players who embrace swag in their sophistication and strength with swagger, embody a trend-setting lifestyle daily. But just being privileged or wealthy doesn't mean you have swag. Players with and without swag clarifies whether a man has swag. It also discusses how the player's mentality affects others. The associated words are swag, swagga, and swagger, all of which have similar meanings, but only two are well used. Swag and swagger are also associated with gang members. Yet the gang members' dress attire consists of baggy and sagging, or skinny and drooping, swaying pants styles. Either is consistent with having swag if the man embodies swagger. Both styles reveal a trendsetter lifestyle, and it doesn't take much money to rock highly fashionable clothes. It is a natural impulse that is strategically controlled by choosing trending clothes. If a player with a profession hasn't been a gang member, or if a player has been a gang member and has retired, he still possibly embodies swag. Yet still, there are players without swag, men who don't embody arrogant feelings, ideas, or thoughts with swagger. And they simply don't value the trendsetter lifestyle. While gang members often are players, it doesn't mean they're gentlemen who embrace politeness. The overall view is that an ambitious man can be arrogant or gentle as a trendsetter, and the goal for women is to choose wisely. Because the word swagger has given players a personification to hide behind, fueled with arrogance and lies. Otherwise, this is just a word that describes a man's clothing and lifestyle. There are more titles that prove men's inner sophistication and strength, but what players value isn't often what women desire from them. Yet, a woman ought to know whether her man has swag. Many play the field with multiple women and act cold-hearted towards anything that can be obtained righteously because the sex addiction overrides common sense, as does any addiction. Essentially, a woman's place is to upkeep the home, but women are getting more responsibility added to their role, as players value a woman to pay her share of the bills. And so, players classify their women as cray, after being exposed, and they can't keep their lies together concerning the other women or men in their lives. Therefore, women are getting a bum rap when it comes to our place in a marriage, since same-sex marriage has taken an alternative forefront as the overall relationship. We women deserve more from a relationship. No woman desires a man who classifies himself as a player and don't acknowledge his stewardship. We women need to be able to claim our angel status with fewer men acknowledging their stewardship. God made Eve a helpmate of the Garden of Paradise, but players are taking this for granted. While most women desire answers, the players aren't providing them. This is why swag needs clarifying so the women can move on to find deeper peace in life. Just saying the words "I got swag" doesn't clarify whether a man has swag. And just because a man says that he has swag, it doesn't mean he does. Dilemma on the player mentality. In this contemporary world, women desire a better understanding of whom to direct their righteous spirit, and kids desire to know who their fathers are to respect the ancient gods in heaven. Players ought to acknowledge that a sexual relationship involves long-suffering, obedience, and patience to the biblical knowledge, to embody moral character. Vainness with a cold-hearted nature doesn't show respect for kid-friendly bonds of communication. With God's guidance, the followers can be led in a righteous direction. The Bible remains formally, socially, and traditionally available for the higher righteousness. But over time, people's beliefs and opinions have distorted the accounts of the Bible, and yet it reveals mankind's greatest intent. The church age still exists in people's hearts, and it is necessary to honor it until a change has been made. While people don't need to say, "If you don't do this or that, you won't go to heaven," the decision is truly up to God. Initially, it was possible to have heaven on earth. The beginning of temptation, Eve seduced Adam into eating the forbidden apple in Genesis 3 verse 11. Thereafter, in Genesis 6:11 to 9:17, God told Noah to build an ark because all flesh had corrupted its way upon the face of the earth. When Noah built the ark, God then said to repopulate the earth. After God destroyed the earth and the human race, there were only 8 individuals left. Noah, his wife, his 2 sons, their wives, and his father and grandfather were accompanied by the living animals. This is when Noah and his sons began the sin of infidelity, as they had their way with the female population. As a result, concepts, principles, and relations got blown out of proportion. God never intended men to watch over every woman as an object for his lustful desires. Proverbs 6 verse 26 advises a man to cheat only with a promiscuous woman. For using a whorish woman, a man is bought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. One of the commandments in Exodus 20 verse 14 is that, "You shall not commit adultery," and this applies to both men and women. Neither of these formally says that daily concerns, building trust, earning respect, and showing emotions are also required to love her as a wife. Marriage requires both acknowledging respect and trust, due to Eve's seducing temptation and man's infidelity in the beginning. Nowadays, knowledgeable players don't respect a woman's privacy after telling them she does have a man. If the woman has a ring on or says she is married, they don't give her the acknowledgement. Also, players want their women to accept them using other women, and if not, it can become a problem. And this is where these types of relationships fail the most. Once a player's main goal is to deny respect and trust in a relationship, he isn't necessarily in the relationship for long-term purposes. This has led to other behaviors such as ego tripping. This type of behavior means the man has an agenda, and either he is addicted to sex or needy. Sure, everyone falls from grace. But if men don't stop opening lustful events or scenes, women wouldn't want to explore extra pleasure satisfaction. These men tend to ego trip when there is too much violence in the world. Ego tripping and multiple relations are pretty much classified as elements of arrogance, either of which has led to the men dominating their wives with excessive behavior. If players value getting on track with God, they ought to stop all their habitual behavior. Men not showing their emotions has been an issue. Ancient Bible scholars who wrote the Bible didn't give men much accountability for their original marriage. A woman is to remain an angel, not a stripper or whore, but men are steadily dragging these women into multiple relations. If a woman disagrees, she is labeled as a dull woman. These men ought to own what they say, control what they can, let go of what they can't, and remain faithful to directions, events, goals, and plans. Some men ought to acquire further education to obtain financial freedom righteously to keep it. They ought to stop adding responsibility on the women in their life, to prevent them from becoming the Jezebel in the relationship. But most men treat every woman as an object to repair the relationship they didn't have with their mother. Yet most women desire a man who will love them throughout eternity, a man who will admit his faults. The passion for a God. The world is very critical now and needs something to meditate on that isn't surrounded by lies, yet truths bring about certainty. The dark ages are getting the best of mankind. Most players don't acknowledge the father or husbandman status. Many become trapped in the prison system syndrome and can't break free mentally, and then become hesitant to seek righteous guidance, enabling fewer opportunities. And so these players don't respond with a loving and kind spirit or speak words of wisdom after being taught irrational concepts by family and friends, which results in deceit, fear, and hate. But currently, the entire world needs joy, peace, and love. To bring about certainty is to put aside falseness to meet on fruitful ground, enabling a respectable wisdom for future generations. Also, the Church al-Hakim Allah established needs reformation to bring certainty to people's lives, along with the kingdom of God being revitalized to enable greater and more valid opportunities. Otherwise, there will continually be delinquent fathers, but you have to value change for yourself more than anyone wants you to. We can talk and write books till we are blue in the face. Until you stand for an eternal life full of abundance, you won't receive the gift of joy, peace, and love as witnesses of Allah. You must take on challenges and face hardcore facts rather than hide in deceit, fear, or hate. To players trapped in the prison system syndrome, your father or mother can't live a righteous life for you, you have to want it yourself. Do players go to church? Most acknowledged players do not, others look for women or be with their wives. But there are players from both religious and non-religious backgrounds. Bottom line, respect in relationships requires accountability, self-awareness of actions, and stewardship. It also means both feeling blessed to be in the relationship while making equal decisions. It also means knowing intimate details about one another, but not to the point of using the details against the other. Both in the relationship ought to value keeping one another's secrets private no matter what goes down, otherwise, either will betray trust and guidance. Neither is to overlook current positive outcomes, just to make a responsible decision about a plan without confirming a mutual agreement. Ultimately, planning long-term goals helps overcome dramatic circumstances. Taking back control. If men value taking back control of their lives, they ought to first acknowledge these two words, belief and influence, which can confuse the personal direction and plans of a man's journey in life. This is how playgirls break a man's inner strength and dominate their effortless behavior. Once the spirit is broken, men tend to avoid embracing self-awareness by not being accountable for their actions. When a man embraces confidence without acknowledging these two-word meanings, their life often gets off track with multiple relations. Just because a woman shows you attention, it doesn't mean she acknowledges a relationship to come with responsibility. When a woman looks for a man to get out of embracing accountability and self-awareness for her actions, this means she wants him to value her as being influential in some cause or matter. This, too, means she wants him to value the cause or matter as a belief. And generally, this is when she takes control of his daily life. Once he values her opinion, she then acknowledges having control over his beliefs, which influences his behavior. Only willpower and determination will help to overcome dramatic circumstances once you have acknowledged the rigorous proof right before your eyes. This can be helpful information if she's a habitual liar, a thief, an abuser, or a killer to completely get out of the relationship. Otherwise, men ought to avoid giving up personal direction and plans. Personal direction enables a better quality care for kids, and being a player, man, or woman, means the kids will be put on the back burner. How to spot arrogance and lies in a relationship. Individuals who lie usually have an agenda, commitments, goals, or prior plans they just won't break. This may or may not include commitments with an outside lover, female or male, commitments to friends or family, a goal that would get them acknowledgement with their group, and/or goals they want to obtain before committing to a relationship. When a person gets puffed up with arrogance during conversations, generally it means they have an agenda. If they have a habit of boasting, ordinarily, this means they have prior plans. If they exercise pride, this means they have goals come first, and they may not want to get off track with multiple relations. When a person exercises haughtiness, they have prior commitments they just won't break. The agenda, commitments, goals, or prior plans can become negative or positive in either person's life. When one or both persons in a relationship can't or won't commit, either person may feel a sense of insecurity and may be a jealous type. Jealous types can be controlled even with small things. After that, the house of drama with excessive control can lead to violence. These men's and women's spirits are often broken when they want to be right in a relationship. They, too, value getting a point across rather than the relationship itself. Controlling what you can and knowing when to let go. Once either person in a relationship starts to put others before the relationship wholeheartedly, it means they have given up on the relationship working at all. This is when it's time to just let go. If this is the woman in a relationship, keep in mind the Bible never states formally that a woman needs to build trust, earn respect, or acknowledge the feelings and emotions of her spouse. Women find it difficult to acknowledge their feelings and emotions in a deeper way than basics. Player mentality to habitual habit. Dating multiple people at the same time is a habit of not being content with what you have. A routine behavior is repeated regularly and occurs unconsciously. The process of an old habit exercises an excessive impulse that becomes uncontrollable. Once it becomes uncontrollable, it's then habitual and thus a disorder. Overcoming denial of infidelity requires effort, and memories can linger on to the next relationship, etc. This can create chaos in a relationship and for individuals around. The process by which new behavior can become automatic is through habit formation. To overcome the old behavior, learn new behavior. Overall, this will change the formation of the habit. Dating multiple people is currently going unnoticed as habitual in persons exhibiting it, since the world advocates for what is the here and now of any popular behavior. Favorable topics. What a good man is to the women I have talked to. 01. A man has more education than a high school diploma. 02. A man keeps enough money in his access to cover the daily date expenses. 03. A man acknowledges bathing daily and dressing up with expensive cologne. 04. A man acknowledges he doesn't need to be a player, just honor his stewardship. 05. A man doesn't come home smelling like sex daily. 06. A man doesn't hide his arrogance over his sensitive side. 07. A man helps with responsibilities around the house daily. 08. A man doesn't have another woman in the house as soon as his woman leaves. 09. A man doesn't date the babysitter. 10. A man acknowledges being with a woman exercises his masculine side versus being with another man. 11. A man acknowledges his fair pay towards the bills. 12. A man doesn't go out and buy the first junk car he can find, just to prove he has swag. 13. A man doesn't look at every woman as a sex object. 14. A man visualizes his woman as his rock and allows her to be his rock. 15. A man doesn't beat on a woman. 16. A man has respect for kids. 17. A man doesn't force a woman to sleep with others outside the relationship. 18. A man won't break his woman's spirit. 19. A man won't break the kids' spirits. 20. A man doesn't sit around the house eating too much getting a fat stomach, one who exercises daily. What a good woman is to the men I have talked to. 01. A woman cleans the house and cooks often. 02. A woman teaches the kids to respect their biological father. 03. A woman who remains undefiled from cancers and diseases. 04. A woman acknowledges displaying her youthful appearance. 05. A woman doesn't try to wear the pants. 06. A woman doesn't make her man wear the dress. 07. A woman embraces her inner sophistication and strength. 08. A woman doesn't talk shade about her man to family or friends. 09. A woman who will work to help pay the bills. 10. A woman doesn't run the streets drinking alcohol and smoking drugs. 11. A woman doesn't sit around the house eating too much getting a fat stomach, one who exercises daily. 12. A woman doesn't spend all their rainy day funds on shopping. 13. A woman can read, is smart, and has more education than a high school diploma. 14. A woman with a good paying job. 15. A woman has respectable friends. 16. A woman who dresses respectably. 17. A woman who won't mess around with friends. 18. A woman is fruitful towards family and friends. 19. A woman who reads the Bible and takes it wholeheartedly. 20. A woman has respectable parents. Bottom line, no one is perfect, and everyone can strive to do better. Ambition versus tiller of the ground. God made Adam a gardener. He never considered whether this would include his career ambitions. Either determines a man's direction or interests he values most. An ambitious man has become of more value in this contemporary world. Adam is a companion, and the ambitious man is a partner, but both can become a husband and partner. Surprisingly, an ambitious man can become eternally single with selfless pride. Try not to be a man who is 1. A doubter. He isn't interested in anything that will last long term if you must step out of your comfort zone to achieve it. So, he doubts anything will benefit you, but he rather steals someone else's accomplishments to stand superior over them. A hater of dreams and goals of another. 2. A man doesn't acknowledge his stewardship. He is a cheap date who relies heavily on validating whether a woman is needy. A hustler-type date. 3. A micromanager man, he is a control freak who critiques everything people do and say, nothing a woman can do will ever be good enough. A vibe ruiner. 4. A narcissistic man, who just had his heart broken, and he is still in love with the woman and denies it. But upon every impulse, his life still revolves around needing advice or opinions from her. A distant date. 5. An acknowledgeable player, he never grows up and is self-centered and stubborn. He avoids commitments, also the acknowledgement of an equal partnership, his mind is centered on Neverland. An annoying and arrogant date. 6. An ego-tripping man, he lacks empathy and sensitivity for true discernment, all while appearing confident, educated, and successful. He will remind anyone of his achievements continually. He is a know-it-all man who is always right and will shut anyone up just to prove a point. A self-esteem ruiner. Avoid dating a woman who is 1. A criticizer, she continually nitpicks critical things about people, and nothing a man can do will ever satisfy her. A self-esteem ruiner. 2. A Debbie Downer, she has reoccurring events happening in her life, most of which are nightmares, therefore, everything sucks, and she has been mistreated time and time again. A bitter date. 3. A doubter, she isn't interested in anything that will last long-term if you step out of your comfort zone to achieve it. So, she doubts anything will benefit you, but she rather steals someone else's accomplishments to stand superior over them. A hater of dreams and goals of another. 4. Indecisive, she doesn't make responsible decisions or take a stand for what's right, but she wants credit for advice and answers to trivial encounters. A born date. 5. Materialistic, she is only concerned about herself no matter the cost. A date won't appreciate anything. 6. Undesirable, when she isn't the star of the show, the nicer you are to her the meaner she becomes. A self-centered and stubborn date. Remember, these responses can be reversed upon every impulse. Unfortunately, you will encounter women who don't meet certain requirements, so try to avoid ruining their self-esteem. Because a man who waits for an eternal mate won't micromanage. So, don't let your self-worth be the extent of the story, other people have it worse. Give to a charity to avoid greed if you have access to wealth. Acknowledge God's signs and wonders for finding an eternal mate and then treat your mate with an equal partnership. Ego-tripping, arrogance, and stubbornness as an ambitious man will only result in being eternally single. Indecisiveness, to be indecisive is to lack the direction of destiny or to be undecided about the correction of something. Even to lack sentimental thoughts about what you stand for in general. Most times indecisiveness is what prevents relationships from graduating into the marriage stages, while most of these couples appear outwardly on social networks. The issue with indecisiveness, according to the Bible, you can't be outward and stand for truths, or expect to remain in a marriage for 25 years or longer when indecisiveness attracts dull partners. No one wants a spouse who won't stand for what they believe. Outwardly, people tend to stand on any point that they think will make them appear diverse, knowing well they have an agenda, to get what one wants no matter the cost. A cheater may avoid true discernment in situations by not choosing long-term strategies. All this is what makes people appear arrogant, corny, or self-centered during conversations. It shouldn't be surprising that more women are asking for divorce than men. Attracting dull partners isn't the only reason marriages are leading to divorce. Other reasons: adversity, arrogance, avoidance of stewardship, criticism, ego-tripping, doubting, downer, greed, materialistic nature, micromanager, narcissism, selfish pride, stubbornness, and undesirability. Not enough people are avoiding indecisiveness to change human health or the system's corruption itself, and you can see this immensely in the world. Does being diverse mean you will overcome the adversity? Not necessarily when you represent more than one origin or orientation. Especially if it is religion or sex, when you can't give God the glory of having experienced the formality. Not being diverse can also mean being unwilling to change traditions that are unbearable to live by. However, the key variable is to change according to moderation, to balance between the two extremes of heaven and hell. Deny, hide, or ignore the eternal mate. When you deny the eternal mate God set aside, you end up back in the dating cycle. When you ignore the eternal mate throughout the relationship, it creates confusion and disappointment. When you hide dirty deeds from the eternal mate throughout the relationship, it creates physical and verbal fights. If any of this starts at the beginning of the relationship, it can result in breakups. Breakups sometimes last an eternity, and neither of these is good when waiting for the marriage date. Furthermore, Someone who wants to visualize their eternal mate achieving success rather than failing in life wouldn't deny, hide things from, or ignore them. Dull man or woman, although dull can be considered a norm. Jane Doe or Joe Doe is commonly used in homicide to say a person doesn't have an identity. The average plain Jane or Joe means someone unwilling to cooperate in multiple positions or relations. Plain from a female sense is someone unwilling to initiate foreplay, and also unlikely to go along with being a stripper or whore. And from a male sense, someone who is unwilling to initiate foreplay or unable to give his woman an orgasm. Also, in a male sense, he is classified as a 3-minute or quickie type of man. When one of the persons in a relationship can't move into multiple positions, they too are classified as dull. What tends to happen? The person may have had weight gain or pain from injuries. However, just as sexual patterns get compared, paying a tab when asking someone out on a date also gets compared to being dull. If you prefer the ethical values that come with religion, don't step out of that comfort zone for sin. Sex object, initially, it is a toy, an image, or something to lust after. There are multiple ways men and women can explore extra pleasure satisfaction. It doesn't have to be done outside a marriage. If a man acknowledges a woman as needy, he also acknowledges her as vulnerable and weak. Men ought not to advocate being a player, using every woman as an object, or they will end up broke and heartbroken every time they leave the house. What is ego tripping? Self-importance with quick pace and rhythmic talk that involves arrogant behavior, occasionally selfless pride. Generally, the formation is an attitude of a temper tantrum to get what one wants. Check your woman, man. Men who cheat on their women in local communities use the quote, "Men check your woman," when another man's woman checks them. Often, they have social behavior and vocabulary inadequacy in their conduct. They may even lack long-term direction and goals. As a result, they would rather not be vulnerable to correction coming from a female, and this is one exclusive reason why they cheat on their women. In many cases, they are all over the place trying to date another man's woman using random tactics to make themselves look appealing and nice. But once she checks him, he doesn't find her attractive any longer, and then it turns into a bitter feud. It isn't about stepping out of your comfort zone to hinder progress in the current relationship. This is ego tripping and what most players tend to do to avoid inadequate social issues. It is a part of the temper tantrum of getting one's way. If more men learned words of wisdom, less destruction and violence would be going on in the streets. Using words of wisdom daily requires knowledge and proper etiquette to avoid ego-checking situations. Formal observance of a person's appearance with regards to respect has been broken too long not to want to change social patterns in local communities. So, beware of the ego-tripping attitude. It is what breaks up relationships all around the globe. Initially, it is best to avoid confrontations of any kind to put God's requests first. Class, a formal person who is elegant with dignity and grace, which is shown in their behavior and the way they dress. Masculinity, also called manhood or manliness, is a set of attributes, behaviors, and roles associated with boys and men. As a social construct, it is distinct from the definition of the male biological sex. Standards of manliness or masculinity vary across different cultures and historical periods. Both males and females can exhibit masculine traits and behavior. Traits traditionally viewed as masculine in Western society include strength, courage, independence, violence, and assertiveness. Machismo is a form of masculinity that emphasizes power and is often associated with a disregard for consequences and responsibility. Virility, from the Latin vir, man, is like masculinity but especially emphasizes strength, energy, and sex drive. Gentleman, a man who is a good breeder, honorable of the family or social lifestyle. And a man who is civilized and educated with an independent income, a personal servant, who is sensitive and well-mannered. Embodying swag with labels of graphical highly fashionable clothes means, the man who dresses aggressively probably earns street credit. A gentleman dresses formally in simple, fashionable clothes, respectable. Nowadays a man who embodies swagger can practice respecting authority and earn formal respect, to become a gentleman that embraces politeness. And gentlemen can now earn street credit doing respectable things while wearing casual and formal clothes with swag. Gentlemen are what most ladies are seeking nowadays, not just a player or F-boy. The gentleman who embodies swag is more likely a nice man. However, embracing swag, swagga, or swagger as a gentleman won't change the fact that most men are players, whether they got swag or not. The goal wasn't to change the game, only the player. So, turn down, rather than being turned up for a lifetime. This isn't healthy for anyone. Sagging pants history. During the 1970s, I remember kids at school mocking adults who wore their pants above the waist. When the kids saw them, they would pull their pants down below the waist, mocking these individuals, and then they would all laugh out loud. The kids associated this type of behavior with a child molester, a snitch, or an Uncle Tom. These were the original reasons to change the pants worn above the waist, and then eventually prison and street styles changed. Nowadays, wearing pants below the waist is called sagging pants, which gets associated with being a gang member or player who embraces swag, swagga, or swagger. Swagger versus swag. Typically, having swagger or swag is unique to a man's confidence and style. It means a man who wears aggressive clothes with inner sophistication and strength. Swagger is perceived as an arrogant manner of walking, which includes feelings, ideas, and thoughts. And swag gets perceived as a decorative drooping curve sway style of wearing fashion labels. Whether wearing baggy or skinny sagging styles, both jeans and pants embrace coolness. Down low men. Some people still call them straight mans. They wear sagging pants, so multiple sexual types can see. They are men who still date women. There are multiple reasons why men wear sagging pants. This book is not to target them in any way, rather, to clarify the intent. Mainly to further understand men who wear sagging pants and to help them change their evil ways. Gang mentality. Criminal gang activity has been on the rise since the 1960s. Their activities in crime and violence involve drug distribution, murder, robbery, and theft. Gang members tend to have low self-esteem with no goals or values. As a result, their common crime and crime of choice is a street drug pharmaceutical. Their overall intent in committing the crime is to have a better quality of life, but they often die trying. During the process, they tend to endanger and harm innocent human lives because they do not value life. Gang members often visualize future activities and then force others to commit crimes or give up their possessions. They are well known for getting what they want recklessly, all of which are often involved in organized crime. For them, the material, idols, and greed mean more. The ghostly appearance and fast dollars come with an indecisive lifestyle, and the beliefs of gang activity are more dramatic than life itself. And sure, they have more guilt than other individuals. They are a target for cops, so they look for an escape. When ordinary people visualize gang members walking down the street, they think the gang member will become problematic with things such as graffiti, murders, robberies, theft, or even vandalism. When promiscuous women visualize a well-known gang member walking down the street, their thoughts are, "Oh, I wonder if he is single," and they generally want to give them their phone number to be asked out on a date. Some gang members are parents, and rarely the money ever gets spent wisely. Overall, criminal gang activity does involve aggressiveness, drinking alcohol, arrogance, bullying, coercion, converting, controlling nature, death rituals, deceit, distribution of illegal drugs, down low, drunkenness, gangbang, gang banging, smoking illegal drugs, lies, manipulation, multiple sex partners, over-controlling behavior, excessive thoughts, nudity, physical fights, random sexual partners, robbery, sexual characters, theft, threesomes, and verbal cursing. Being a gang member exercises the opposite of believing in God, and God isn't against a gang member as a human being. It is the things a gang member does that eliminate their belief in God. To gang members who commit crimes, acknowledge the difference between a living sacrifice and a sinful sacrifice, and also reap where you have sown versus reaping where you haven't sown. Earn legal money and spend it wisely. The innocent lives that you put in danger, you won't get away with. And it isn't possible to avoid God's wrath of judgment when you take advantage of people exercising greed. Ask God for forgiveness and change your evil ways. Most importantly, don't go back to committing crimes. As a man, you desire to provide for the home to control the structure. This may require you to make a 25-year investment into owning a home or building an empire. So, you will need to create long-term goals to reach your accomplishments. But no matter the wealth a man acquires, some will still cheat. The Old Covenant of the Bible does have reference to a man cheating, by saying not to choose a married woman for sexual desires, because it will negatively affect his entire life. Either way, it is best to avoid cheating. If you are a man who doesn't set goals, you are going to attract a woman who makes short-term plans. Acknowledging the new covenant as partakers of the resurrection, marriage is not a necessity until after claiming the angelic prophet status. Men, it is the conditions and principles of the resurrection to control your sexual desires. The benefits are endless. You, as a man, cannot stand firm in decision-making, just based on the short term. Short-term goals are easy, and long-term goals require effort. But if the short term works for you, keep doing what you do. Eventually, you will desire long-term decision-making because the kids may suffer more. If you don't stand firm on God's word, the empire or home isn't going to last. These are a couple of reasons a man must become trustworthy sex-wise. I just got a future vision. The karma flips back and forth. Say if people in 10 years had to move more versus staying put, due to climate change or wildfires, etc. You may have to become flexible while moving often, and others probably wouldn't have to make any adjustments. Short-term decision-making may then become all in all. Either way, a man's place is to provide for the home. Whether you are going to marry or not, just choose wisely. Continuation of influence versus beliefs, both affect a man's authority over his behavior, direction in life, determination, self-control, and willpower. Influence is the process of producing effects on the actions, behavior, opinions, etc., of another or others. Belief is confidence in the existence or truth of something not immediately susceptible to rigorous proof. We all confuse these two meanings. Both can become bad or good circumstances in life. If the influence isn't able to compare with activities, biblical knowledge, or educational resources, it can be classified as a bad influence. Oftentimes young men are highly impacted by both and then become unable to take control over influences and thus put their original beliefs aside. Although you fear conviction from family and friends, you ought to acknowledge the Father would want you to remain a prophet, not a criminal, illicit drug seller, pimp, robber, or thief. These characteristics involve sinful sacrifices, not living sacrifices. You must acknowledge the worst influences that can lead to this behavior. Once you have acknowledged that the influences are bad, simply step away from them. You cannot remain a prophet in these circumstances. The Father will be comparing your mental stability to see whether you are worthy of inheritance. A man's gift maketh room for him and bringeth before great men. Proverbs 18 verse 16. The common way to lose gifts is not to earn them. Warfare love people. Warfare takes place during the transition from the physical death of hell on earth to the spiritual life of heaven on earth. Warfare love plays a key role while drifting away from God. It happens when anyone excessively rebels against God's message, and anything surrounding God's warfare love people typically don't want to hear about. They immediately connect with the evildoers' communities, to honor the flesh in dramatic circumstances, rather than acknowledge that all things are heavenly in their lives to give God glory and honor. Signs of a warfare person: a constant affliction of others or self, and they value constant validation from evildoers' communities, over clear advice from a believer. In most cases, they point the finger and hold grudges against their partner and tear them down with unbelief in God. It is more likely they will control and dominate their partner after that and devour souls with avoidance of admitting fault. Because they don't adjust to others' beliefs, they would rather you adjust to theirs. Most of their relationships are built on envy, greed, and lust, in which they become blinded by envy and greed. They value comfort and strength from evil acts in one another. Most times, the evil acts determine further acceptance. The irrational concepts help form content with the other as an object of lustful desires. Unfortunately, they never seek to repair debt or relationships. It is of no importance to them. Usually, they are on the receiving end of any bargaining with controlling, loud, and pushy tactics. And they will terrorize others who don't agree with their tactics while making endless decisions surrounding fear. Although it is a huge ego boost for people who devour souls to date random evildoers, anyone who knows better ought to do better. Warfare people don't maintain their ideal weight. They are anxious and hostile, forming a rapid movement that creates tension for others around them. Due to the constant movement of irrational habitation, many warfare people die the final death decree without ever waiting on an eternal mate. We all have fallen short of the glory of God in some way or another. If you are a warfare person, change and an eternal mate is still possible. Graceful, humble people immediately connect with righteous good works communities. Just stop. Giving in to greed and lustful desires creates recklessness. Subrace groups of humanity. Humanity accounts for the entire body of people in the world, while subraces only account for a fraction of a person's characteristics or identity. Subraces are used to verify ethnic backgrounds. Some include African American, Caucasian, Chinese, Hispanic, and Indian. Sympathetically, when a person talks about someone according to race, they are referring to a subrace background. Many people perceive it as offensive to talk about someone according to race. However, most people need to overcome subrace racism rather than race racism, and all subraces exercise many forms of racism. Even after it has been confirmed that there is only one human race, the race card continues to be a critical focal point. Most people still don't visualize an entire human race at all, and fortunately, this is the start of overcoming. Some may not be able to comprehend what it means to be a part of one human race. Others know what the human race means but are too arrogant, ignorant, and selfish to change their passive thinking. Optimistically, once you visualize humanity as a whole body of people and the subrace as a fraction of a person's character or identity, you can overcome anything. Nature and natural with humanity. A man's ability to behave in the wrong manner derives from animals. If a man's character shows an unfavorable or unforgivable nature, it is linked to animals. When you classify behavior as a part of color or race, it doesn't justify the wrong actions. Example: Joe has hillbilly ways, but Jane has ghetto ways, and it is by nature these ways exist and their natural ability to adapt to a hillbilly or ghetto lifestyle. Scientists have confirmed there is only one human race, so you don't necessarily need to judge according to color or race. This is another way you create problems within communities. Having said that, when a man eats more processed foods, of course, his nature will be more compatible with animal behavior. But when a man eats more natural foods like green vegetables and fruits, his character changes to a more concerned person. All adults and kids should consume less meat to avoid excessive animal-like behavior. One serving size for each adult and teen, or 1/2 of a serving size for kids, is enough to not be consumed with animal-like behavior. If you are unsure what a serving size is, limit meat portions to the size of your palm. Tip: what if cheaters were a part of the police department? People would then be forced to pay a fine every time they cheat on their spouses or go to jail. Just as regular fines don't resolve crimes, multiple relations will never be permanently resolved. All this to say, a man or woman doesn't want to walk down a tunnel to see the light at the end, and after getting there, their spouse turns the lights out, and once the lights are on again, they are with another person.